So in this video, I just kind of wanted to give you some tips for building an ERD from scratch. First thing you're going to want to keep in mind is this is typically an iterative process. You might have one iteration and you might go back and make improvements to it. And that's pretty typical. There's almost always room for improvement within an ERD. Second thing to keep in mind with an entity relationship diagram is the idea that there are multiple right ways of modeling data. There's multiple right ways. They can be different, but they can still be right. But there's infinite wrong ways of doing things. So you want to make sure that you avoid that. Now, with those two things out of the way, what I like to start with is to think about what would logical entities be. Okay, so here we have a company modeled. Okay, and you'll see that we have an employee entity, we have a salary entity, we have a department entity, we have a position entity, and we have department position acting as an associative entity. So how did I come to those? Well, I started off by thinking about what is important for a company to have modeled. And I thought, well, they need to have an employee, the employee needs to have a salary, and there needs to be information about departments. So with that in mind, I went ahead and I built out an employee entity. I built out a department entity. And I did not originally have a salary entity. But I got to thinking about things a little bit more. And as I was building this employee entity, I just had an attribute for salary. The problem with doing that is that when you make a table out of the employee entity, when you just have a single field, a single attribute, or in the case of a table, it's going to be a single column. What you have is you don't have the ability to store historic salary information. So, a lot of people get annual raises. Some people get, merit raises. There's always changes in salary taking place. And if you do not store that separate from your employee, what you're going to find is you're going to find what's called a deletion anomaly. In this deletion anomaly, what's happening is that you can only see the current piece of information. So to avoid that, you typically just separate out and create a new entity. And that's exactly what I did with creating the salary entity here. So you'll find a lot of stuff like that. Now, beyond that, one thing that's vital is that within inside of your entities, you want to make sure that the attributes are essentially one piece of information. Notice how I have address split up here. I have add line 1, add line 2, city, state, and zip, all as separate attributes. And that's important to do. Because if you have them all in one attribute, just called address, you'll find that that's going to cause you a lot of problems. Okay, so it's always best to separate the attributes out into one atomic component. So those are just some tips to kind of get you started on making an ERD. In terms of how you go about doing this, there's really no right or wrong way. There's a lot of software available. You can use the data modeler built into MySQL Workbench. You can, of course, use platforms like draw.io. You can also use handwriting. Whatever works best for you, it's totally fine with me. So apart from that, make sure you read chapter 7 of the book to get some more tips and tricks for modeling data. But apart from that, I look forward to seeing you when we start to build stuff in SQL. So have a great rest of your day.